first one. The first of the balls. Okay.
We're talking about UFOs right now, Gus.
When I say balls, it's UFO. It's not.
Right.
Get your mind out of it. Oh. Okay. So when I was in my senior year in high school, I was on the bus going into school. We were driving through my neighborhood, and I just happened to look over through the window, obviously, and there's houses, and behind the houses there's woods, and in the woods between the houses I just saw like this big orange ball. And it was just sitting there, but it was hovering a little bit above the ground, and it wasn't moving at all. It was just completely perfectly still. And of course the first thing I thought is big ass balloon. I don't know why it's in the woods, but what's holding it to the ground? And I was like really looking hard to see if I could see like any kind of strings or ropes or anything, because it was not moving at all. And I'm thinking like, it's not like a super windy day, but you would think you'd see it wobble or something a little bit. It was just so perfectly still. And I'm like, so there's got to be something holding it to the ground. And then I look, and while I'm looking for strings or something that aren't there, or something to anchor it to the ground, I'm also noticing that there's no seams at all. That it's a perfect sphere that is seamless. And I'm thinking again, if it's a balloon or some kind of fabric or something, you'd see some kind of like markings or seams or something on it. And it was really big. And what was weird about it is nobody else on the bus was reacting to it. But usually on my bus, everybody's talking and goofing off, and I would just be quiet and keep to myself and look out the window. But nobody else. I expected at some point I'd hear somebody go like, "What is that thing?" But nobody did. So we kept on moving down the road and out of the neighborhood and onto the main road, which was Route 9. And I could still see it. It was that big that when we were going a little bit down the road, you could still see it. And then later on that day, I talked to my best friend, and then kind of the spot where I first sighted it is almost like it's kind of across the street from his house. And I just saw him a few months ago in September. I went back home to New Jersey, and we talk about this every time we get together now. And he's like, I saw that thing too. Like he could see it from his like living room, because like he's like sitting there like eating cereal or something before he goes out to the bus stop, and you could just see this thing just sitting there. So that's how I know I'm not crazy. Is like he saw it, and again he, like we were talking earlier, like I didn't really describe it to him. Like he just started telling me about this thing, and I was like, I saw the same thing. And then maybe, this was like right at the end of the school year when I first had that experience. And then maybe about like a month or two later, it was after school was out, I'd graduated, but I'm still hanging around like a bum during the summer. And I just went out to get the mail. Like a lot of my like my few UFO experiences are something mundane. I'll tell you about the other really mundane thing. I just went out to check the mail, and for some reason I like look up while I'm like getting mail out of the box, and like above, not directly above my house, it might have been like a block or two over, but it was close enough that was another one of these things, but it wasn't orange, it was white. And it's just, again, I didn't really see it moving. It's just hanging there in the sky. Not very high up, like maybe like 500 feet. And I only know what 500 feet looks like because I went like parasailing once and they took us up 500 feet. But there were like, what are those vertical takeoff and landing AR-15s?
No, Ospreys. They were a Beetle.
Yeah. So where I grew up was in New Jersey, in Barnegat. It's near McGuire Air Force Base. Warthogs.
Warthogs are different. They're the ones.
Okay.
They built the plane around the gun for the Warthog.
Anyway, the Cobra Rattler. If you know G.I. Joe, it's the plane that the Cobra Rattler is based off. That's the plane. There were two of these that were circling, probably from McGuire, and they were like kind of flying around this thing. And I just kind of looked at it for a while. You know, this is 1992, so it's before cell phones and stuff. I would have whipped out a cell phone and taken a picture back then. But taking a picture was a real pain in the ass back then if you didn't have a camera on you. So I just watched it for a while. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But yeah, they weren't like attacking it or anything, and it wasn't attacking them, but they were just kind of like slowly, kind of like two of them were just going around it. So I don't know. Like, was it an alien spaceship? I don't know. Like, who can say? It could have just been a military thing because there were, Air Force planes around it. Maybe it was some kind of like a floating, I don't know, like obstacle thingy. Who knows? But it was in the air, and I didn't know what it was, so that makes it an unidentified flying object or aerial object or whatever you want to call it.
UAP.
Yeah. It was in the air, and I can't say what it was. It was very balloon-like, but I didn't. But the weird things about it were that in both cases, these things stood perfectly still, as far as I could tell. And you would think that you'd see some movement from just being in the air from wind, especially if there's planes flying around you fairly close.
Speculate. Go ahead and speculate.
They were so seamless. So I don't know if it was some kind of military technology that they were testing out, or actually something otherworldly. But it was very interesting. And the other UFO I saw, I was younger. I was like this is the first one I saw. Again, some mundane things. I just went out to take the garbage out at night, and I was maybe like 12. And at dark night, and I look up and I see a cloud that is just like lit up from within. Like it would look like if the moon is behind a cloud. But it wasn't the moon, because that's the first thing I thought of. And I looked on the other side of the sky, and the moon is over there. Oh, wow. And this thing is over here. So I'm like, okay, not the moon. And also the moon is like, it's round, it's a sphere. And when it's behind clouds, you can still kind of tell there's like a spherical thing. And this was more like cylindrical. And so what's funny about this too is I was reading an old UFO book from like the 50s. Like I'd gone over, my mom was visiting a friend, and I was stuck at this house while she was talking to her friend, and I found some old books and started reading them, and and her friend was like, oh, you can have that. And it was some incredibly outdated like UFO book from like the 1950s. But from that book, I learned that cylindrical UFOs are a thing. Because I always thought just flying saucers, the classic flying saucer, but they were like, oh, there's lots of cigar-shaped UFOs, and sometimes they hide in clouds. So this idea was already in my brain, but it's like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, it's one of those. And I watched it for a while, didn't have a camera, so I was like, that's cool.
Did you watch it leave?
See that. No, I just kind of watched it, and I was like, okay, I want to go back inside. But the next day at school, I was at the lunch table, and I was like, I forget how I worded it, but basically like, did any of you guys see anything weird last night? And one of my friends, I did not go into detail and say what I had seen, but one of my friends who lived technically in the next town basically described the same thing I saw. He was like, yeah, there was a cloud, and it was lit up from within, and it was, there's some kind of, you could tell there's some kind of like long, elongated shape like under the cloud, but you couldn't see anything about what it was. And it was exactly the same thing I'd seen, and I didn't tell him what I had seen,
so
other than
cool.
that there was a weird thing in the sky.
Right.
So I was like, I'm not crazy.
You had the
validation. I thought maybe I was, because I was reading a book that literally described this thing. But maybe that goes back to the thing you were talking about, like, the communication possibly between, like maybe they decided to be like, oh, you're interested in this crap, okay? So, yeah, we'll show you that we're real.
The day before I seen the last UFO, now there were 7 of us in the car. I think 6 of us seen it. But I was driving on 581, so I couldn't take a picture. And my husband, he's a skeptic, and he's seen it, and he wouldn't take a picture. Here I am driving. I'm like, take a picture, please take a picture. And I'm like, kids, do y'all see that? And it was just hovering.
What did it look like?
It was triangular.
Oh,
yeah, and it had three lights on it,
yeah.
and it was huge. and it was just there, and it was pretty incredible. But the day before, I was thinking, because I had seen one triangular craft before in my life, but the day before I was thinking, I would really love to see another one, but I would like to see it when it's lighter outside, and I would really like it if other people could see it with me, so that because the other time it was only me, you know. Yeah. And so the kid's seen it, and my son is like, I don't know if I'll ever see another triangle UFO. And I'm like, well, if you want to, maybe you will.
You will, right?
But yeah, your pin right there, I would say that's very comparable to the
shape,
the way the ship was. It was like a.
That's a very classic, like it. Well, now it's a classic shape. That there's the triangular ones with like a light at the top. And like,
that's exactly how it was.
Yeah.
The aliens are Trekkies.
There's even like a one of the speculations is that that's a man-made one.
Right.
That's like ones that we made from reverse engineering stuff, and there's a technical term I can't, like, somebody was like, I'll give you like the exact model number.
It felt otherworldly, but I couldn't believe, like, I put a thing on Facebook, I'm like, did anyone see that last night? And no one's seen anything.
I'm gonna have to go.
Thank you for everything. Thank you so much, Justin.
I do have one,
we need to know if you had any.
I did actually. All right, so mine is like third person.
Okay.
Here's the deal. Before I was born, my mother and my father were driving along, and I come from a very rural area. Like, there's nothing around for like 15 miles. And they see this craft, like this saucer, hovering over some trees. So Dad pulls over, and he gets out, and he walks up to it because my dad is insane. And he says it turned sideways, and it just shot off into space.
Yeah.
Damn.
For 20 years, like, those trees never grew. They stayed the same height
That sounds about
the
right.
entire
That's
time.
something that's reported
Until they were cut down, right?
Yeah.
Now, the reason why I believe this is because I was driving, and I got to, like, my parents divorced when I was a kid. I'm like, Mom is taking me to school, and Dad had just told me this story. And I tell her, and she looks at me, and she says, he's telling the truth, I was there. And you've got to realize that my mother and father would disagree on everything out of spite.
This is one thing she's like, yeah,
So
she's saying it's true. She's not lying.
It's the truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
So
gotcha.
that is like.
My parents were like that too.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Robert.